All right, so this video is about classroom management. All right, so when we look at new teachers, this is kind of their key concern going into teaching for the first time, right? How are they probably going to manage the behavior and their students in their class. So two kind of basic goals when it comes to classroom management. Number one, we want to promote social emotional development. All right, so the more that we can have students be aware of their own emotions, how to have proper interactions with other people, being self-regulated, all those things are going to help reduce disruptive behaviors. Right, so we're going to get better behavior if we can promote social emotional development. At the same time, we also want to maximize the time that we have for both teaching and learning. Okay, so one thing that research has shown is that sometimes, even though you'll get a later start to the year as far as covering the material that you need to, sometimes it's best to take the first week or so and really go over the rules and expectations, the procedures of the classroom. All right, so you're not starting content on time. You're spending a lot of time just focusing on this is how things are in this classroom. And so even though you tend to start later, what we find is that by having that focus and laying out the expectations and make sure everything's clear from the beginning, you have fewer disruptions moving forward, so you actually catch up and then surpass where you would have been normally. Right? So sometimes it's beneficial to just take a moment, take a breath, really go over it in detail, and then kind of go into the content. So when we start to plan for classroom management, one thing that we want to consider are rules. Right? What are the specific rules going to be in your class? With this, there are different levels, right? So we could say very specifically and detailed every single little thing, and then we might end up with a list of like 50 rules. Okay, I think of my kids when it comes to this, right? So we had a rule in our house: no running, right? Because they were running too much. We said, okay, no more running. So they stopped running, but then they would jog. I'm like, okay, all right, no more jogging in the house. And then they would stop running, they would stop jogging, but then they would like speed walk really, really fast. And realize we're going to keep doing this over and over and over again and get all these very specific rules. And I was like, I can just imagine us having to say, all right, you cannot go over this miles per hour. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense to keep getting so specific. A better alternative is to try and teach principles, right? This is the core idea. This is what we're striving for. So for our kids, what we try to reinforce after that point was, all right, we want peace and calm in our home. Right? We want to behave in such a way that it's not disruptive to other people and won't necessarily put us in harm's way either. And so we just ask ourselves, is this something that's going to contribute to the peace and calm of the home? And if it's not, then we don't do that thing. All right? So running, not going to contribute to the peace and calm of the home. So what are maybe some key principles that we can have in the classroom that can help be those guiding rules? Okay. All right, so whatever rules you have in place, one of the other things that we can see is that if we have certain procedures, right? So when students come in, this is what we do. When we get back from lunch, this is what we do, right? Anything that we can make where the environment is predictable, right? There is a routine in place. When things become just automatic and they know what to expect, it actually helps facilitate learning and helps students feel kind of more at ease in the classroom as well, because they know what to expect. One of the things that we're going to see is that when you're actually planning for instructional time as well, right? So whenever you're going to be presenting material, you're going to have an activity, going over a lesson, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we have clear learning goals, like we know what the objective is, we know what we want them to learn, and then we want to make sure we're properly planning the time that we have during that activity or the lesson, right? So we want to start on time, and we want to make sure we're reducing what are called dead times. Right, so a dead time is you've maybe provided an instruction and they're getting the materials ready, and before they start or whatever, like it says anytime where there's a gap where there might not be something specific that they're doing, or some people have done it and we're waiting for other people, and so the people waiting, they have dead time. So the more that we can reduce that, it's going to be helpful, right? So anytime we're doing this, again, routines can come in handy here. And just in trying to involve as many students as possible. Okay. Another thing to consider with managing classroom behavior is just how the physical classroom itself is set up, right? So how are the tables or the desk arranged, right? Because sometimes there are ways that, we might need to separate certain students or maybe want to group them together, other students, because we know they can kind of help each other out, right? Anything that we want to consider as far as the actual physical environment, right? And this is where you might actually see, all right, that problem student, we probably don't need them sitting in the back, right? We need to bring them forward, and maybe they're the ones that are going to sit a little bit closer to the teacher's desk or whatever it may be. Okay. When we look at it too, classroom management, we can control to a certain extent what happens in the classroom, but these children exist and have lives outside of the classroom, and so one way that we can help promote better behavior is having open communication with parents, right? If we can be on the same page as them, we can be on the same side, things are going to go a lot smoother, right? Because we get the buy-in from them, and so hopefully we can reinforce what's going on at home, and they can reinforce what's going on in school. And the more of that overlap we can have, the better. So there's different ways to do this. One is just having regular communication with parents, so sending messages, emails, newsletters, just anything to let them know this is what we're covering in class, these are some things that we have coming up, these are just some good reminders, or whatever it may be. There are going to be other times where we have parent-teacher conferences, right? So we are going to invite them in, and we just meet one-on-one with the parents for 10, 15 minutes or so. And we're kind of going over, all right, this is what we're seeing with your child. This is what they're doing great. These may be things that we want to work on a little bit moving forward. So hopefully, in doing all these things, we're going to reduce or even prevent misbehavior and disruptions from happening. No matter what you do, though, at some point, there will be a disruption in the class. At some point, a child or a student will misbehave. So we want to see, when that does happen, what are we going to do? Like, how will we respond? How can we manage that? So there's this idea of called with itness, right? With itness, right? So you're with it. You're aware. You're understanding. You kind of know what's going on. It's like, this is kind of the idea of like you have two eyes in the back of your head, right? You're always aware of what's going on in your room. You're with it. And the more that we have that awareness, students pick up on that, and they tend to be a little bit better behaved, right? The more that they know that we care about them, and if the rules that we have make sense or are enforced properly and consistently, students are less likely to argue. They're less likely to misbehave. Okay? So this is kind of the key thing. We have to be consistent, and we have to follow through. If we say something, we need to make sure we do it. But then we want to make sure we're doing it in a supportive way still. We don't want necessarily the anger to be coming out. And so whatever we say, it needs to match our nonverbal behavior as well. Those two need to be congruent and with each other. Sometimes there's just little things that we can do. So like a lot of times, students don't like, or just people in general, not just students, just people. People don't like when other people stand really close to them. And so sometimes just being physically close to a student, so you walk over to that part of the room, you kind of stand near where they're at, students are less likely to misbehave when the teacher's like right there next to them, right? They're kind of like, well, stop. And like I'll see this as I walk around the classroom, students, as I get closer to them, they start putting those phones away that they were texting on or whatever it may be. So just kind of being physically kind of close to them. And then there's certain things called desist. Right, so we want to desist in a behavior, so it's just kind of very subtle clues as far as someone's talking, and it's just kind of like putting your hand up, saying like this, or one moment, or just giving them the look, right? So there are certain ways that we can just, through nonverbal behavior, communicate that we need to stop, we need to desist with what's going on. Then if it really comes down to it, there are some options as far as like detention or removing them for the classroom. Anytime we do kind of punishment like this, a couple guidelines that can help us, we want to use it as infrequently as possible. So if it needs to happen, it needs to happen. But, it doesn't want to be the first thing that we go to. we don't want to necessarily use this right away either, right? Are there some other options that we can do before we escalate to removing them from the classroom or providing attention? But if it's warranted, if it's something that's needed, we need to do it immediately, and it's going to be focused on the behavior, not the person, the behavior, right? And so we only use only those punishments that are going to be severe enough to eliminate the misbehavior and not go beyond. And then as we're doing this, we want to make sure we're avoiding any displays of anger. Again, we don't want any of those negative emotions to be coming out from us. And then hopefully we can explain and then model more appropriate behavior instead. Like, what was it that we would have been better in that situation? And then just in general, as students are going about, it's not just punishing the misbehavior, but do we see students doing something they are supposed to do, and can we reward that? Can we praise them for their desirable behavior? Because then other students start to pick up on that as well. So it's just something to consider, right? Think about the classes that you had before, the teachers. How have they managed it? What do you think went well? What do you think did not go well? So things for us to consider as we kind of move forward with our own teaching as well.